I record this not for redemption, but for remembrance. The air in this vault is colder than the void between stars, a fitting tomb for the secrets it keeps. My name is Solenvar, once a magos of repute. Now, just a chronicler of damnation. The galaxy burned in the fires of the Horus heresy. Brother turned against brother, and in that desperate shadow, we were sanctioned to commit the ultimate transgression. A project so forbidden, its very conception was an act of heresy. They told us it was to save humanity, to forge a weapon that could end the war. But some lines should never be crossed, some knowledge never unearthed. We delved into arts that were sealed away for a reason, meddling with powers beyond our comprehension. This log is the only testament to our hubris, the only proof of the price we paid, a price the galaxy is still paying. In the shadowed aftermath of betrayal, when the galaxy itself seemed to fracture and burn, the story of the Raven Guard is one of sheer, indomitable will. Picture this. The ash-coked plains of Istvan VA, a world that became a graveyard for loyalty, a monument to treachery. Here, the proud 19th Legion, the sons of Corvus Corax, were led into a meat grinder. Lured by their brother, Oros Lupercal, they expected a battle against rebels. Instead, they found themselves caught in a pincer, with supposed allies turning their guns upon them. The Iron Warriors, the Night Lords, the Alpha Legion, and the Word-Bearers legions they had fought alongside. 4 centuries revealed their true, horrifying colors. What followed was not a battle. It was a massacre, an annihilation. The Raven Guard, specialists in stealth, sabotage, and precision strikes, were forced into a brutal, open engagement against overwhelming numbers and overwhelming firepower. They fought with the ferocity of cornered predators, but even their legendary skill couldn't stave off the inevitable. Corax, their Primarch, a being of shadow and fury, watched as his legion was systematically dismantled. Tens of thousands of his sons were slaughtered, their black armor stained crimson on the poisoned ground of Istvan V. The legion was broken, not just in body, but in spirit. It was a wound that cut deeper than any blade, a betrayal that poisoned the very soul of the Imperium. Somehow, against all odds, a fraction survived. Corax, with a handful of his battered veterans, managed to punch a hole through the traitor blockade, commandeering a vessel and escaping the hellscape of Istvan V. They were a ghost fleet, limping back to their homeworld of deliverance. Imagine the scene as they returned. The joyous welcome that Suda greeted a victorious legion was replaced by stunned, horrified silence. Of the more than 80,000 Space Marines who had set out, fewer than 3,000 returned. They were a shadow of their former selves, a tattered remnant of a once mighty force. The Legion was, for all intents and purposes, dead. The weight of this loss fell squarely on the shoulders of Corvus Corax. The Primarch, usually a figure of quiet confidence and cold calculation, was consumed by grief and a burning, all-consuming rage. He had failed his sons. He had trusted his brother, Horus, and that trust had led to the near extinction of his entire legion. The survivors were haunted men, their faces etched with the horrors they had witnessed. The command structure was shattered, the companies decimated, the vast armories emptied. How could a legion rebuild from such total devastation, especially with the galaxy now plunged into the fires of a civil war? But the Raven Guard are survivors. Their Primarch, a liberator who had freed his own homeworld from tyranny, was not one to succumb to despair. Locked away in the highest spires of the Raven Spire, Corax wrestled with his grief and plotted his revenge. The Imperium was burning, and every loyal soldier was needed. He couldn't wait centuries for the traditional, slow process of creating new Space Marines. The war was now. The traitors were on the march. A desperate plan began to form in the Primarch's brilliant mind, a plan born of necessity and fueled by a thirst for vengeance. Corax knew he needed an army, and he needed it fast. The standard process of recruitment and implantation was too slow, taking years to produce a single battle-ready Marine. He needed a shortcut. He recalled fragmented, forbidden knowledge, whispers of the Emperor's own genetic mastery during the creation of the Primarchs themselves. Could he replicate it? Could he accelerate the growth of a space marine, bypassing the years of indoctrination and conditioning to create warriors in a fraction of the time? The risks were immense. Tampering with the sacred gene seed was a technological heresy of the highest order. The potential for mutation, for failure, for creating monsters instead of saviors was astronomical. This was the genesis of the Raptor Project. Corax gathered his chief apothecaries and geneticists, men like the brilliant but cautious Nex. He tasked them with unlocking the secrets held within his own unique Primarch genetic code. He believed that his DNA, a direct sample from the Emperor's work, held the key to stable and rapid gene seed cultivation. It was a gamble of epic proportions. Failure wouldn't just mean the end of the Raven God. It could unleash horrors upon the galaxy and forever taint the legacy of the 19th Legion. The Legion was already on the brink of extinction. Now, in their darkest hour, they were about to risk everything on a desperate, forbidden science. The laboratories deep within the Rock of Deliverance became a hive of frantic activity. Biovats hummed with unnatural life and arcane machinery, rarely used since the dawn of the Great Crusade, was brought back online. The pressure was immense. Every passing day, news of another world falling to the traitors reached them. The screams of the dying echoed across the warp. Corax pushed his scientists, and himself, to the breaking point. He was driven by a cold, hard fury the needy, to strike back, to make Horus and the other traitors pay for what they had done. He would rebuild his legion, not as it was, but as something new, something faster, something born from the ashes of Istvan V, to become the ultimate instrument of his revenge. And so, the stage was set. The decimated Raven Guard, a legion brought to its knees by betrayal, turned to a path that no one had dared to walk. They were about to tamper with the very essence of what made a space marine, all in a desperate bid to rejoin the fight and exact their vengeance upon a galaxy in flames. This was not just a plan for rebuilding. It was an act of defiance, a statement that, even in the face of annihilation, the sons of Corax would never surrender. They would adapt, they would endure, and they would hunt their enemies from the shadows, no matter the cost. Thank you so much for joining me on this deep dive into the lore. The story of the Raven Guard is a powerful one, and we've only just scratched the surface of their desperate struggle. If you enjoyed this, please consider hitting that like button and subscribing to the channel for more tales from the 41st millennium. Your support is incredible and helps us bring these stories to life. We'll see you in the next one. In the shattered aftermath of the Dropsite Massacre on Istvan V, what remained of the Raven Guard Legion was a ghost of its former glory. Less than 4,000 of the once proud 19th Legion had escaped the slaughter, a scant fraction of the warriors who had descended upon that cursed world. Their Primarch Corvus Corax had managed to extract them from Horus's trap, but the victory, if it could even be called that, was hollow. The psychic shriek of his murdered sons echoed ceaselessly in his mind, a torment that offered no respite. Back in the relative safety of their homeworld, Deliverance, Corax was a changed being. The Lord of Ravens, once a master of shadows and subtle warfare, was now consumed by a singular, burning purpose: vengeance. He saw the Imperium crumbling, the traitors advancing, and his own legion decimated. Time was a luxury he could no longer afford. The standard meticulous process of creating a space marine, a process that took years of indoctrination and biological transformation, was now an insurmountable obstacle. The galaxy was burning, and Corax needed warriors. Now asterisk. Haunted by guilt and driven by a desperate urgency, he convened with his most trusted apothecaries and the discussion was grim, the subject matter bordering on heretical. Corax proposed the unthinkable, a radical acceleration of the gene seed implantation process. He wasn't just suggesting they speed it up. He was suggesting a fundamental change to the very foundation of what it meant to become a space marine. His proposal, which would come to be known as Corax's directive, was to bypass the traditional recruitment of young aspirants. There was no time to raise boys into warriors. Instead, he would take the hardened, seasoned soldiers of the Imperial Army regiments on deliverance men who had already faced the horrors of war, who knew discipline, and whose loyalty was proven. These were not children to be molded, but veterans to be The established protocols existed for a reason. Implanting gene seed into a fully mature adult was a procedure fraught with peril. The subject's body, already fully developed, could violently reject the alien organs. The process could result in catastrophic physiological breakdown, madness, or a swift, agonizing death. It was a gamble of the highest order, tampering with the Emperor's own sacred work. The Legion's surviving leadership was divided. Some, like Chief Apothecary Vincente, were aghast, viewing the plan as a sacrilegious perversion of their biological heritage. They argued that the Emperor's design was perfect, and that to alter it was to court disaster. The potential for mutation, for creating monstrous parodies of Astartes, was too great. They warned Corax that in his haste for revenge, he might sow the seeds of his legion's final damnation. But others, seeing the cold, hard logic of their strategic situation, supported their Primarch. They understood that without reinforcements, the Raven Guard would be little more than a footnote in the history of the Horus heresy. They would be ghosts, unable to meaningfully impact the war. They argued that desperate times called for desperate measures. These veterans were willing volunteers, aware of the risks, and ready to sacrifice everything for a chance to become the Emperor's angels of death and avenge their fallen comrades. Corax listened to the counsel of his sons, his shadowed face a mask of grim determination. The weight of his decision was immense. He was not just the commander of the Raven Guard. He was their father. The gene seed they carried was a part of him, a reflection of his own genetic code. To twist and corrupt it felt like a betrayal of his very being. The ghosts of Istvan V whispered warnings in his mind, telling him not to compound one tragedy with another. But the screams of the living, the pleas of a dying Imperium, were louder. He looked at the meager ranks of his legion and knew that to do nothing was to accept extinction. The path of caution was the path of vengeance demanded a price, and Corax was willing to pay it, even if it meant risking the very soul of his legion. With a voice that carried the weight of 1,000 sorrows, Corax gave the order. The directive was issued. The laboratories on Deliverance were to be repurposed for this terrible new work. He would take the genetic knowledge gifted to him by the Emperor himself, a pure, untainted sample of the Primarch genome, and use it as the template for this accelerated process. Ebelivid tis Corax patorn gene seed, derived directly from the source, would be more stable, more potent, and could mitigate the risks of implantation in mature subjects. And so, the first generation of these new recruits, the Raptors, as they would later be known, were prepared. These were men who had seen battle, men who understood loss, now standing on the precipice of a transformation that could either elevate them to the status of demigods or destroy them utterly. They were not boys dreaming of glory. They were soldiers answering a desperate call to arms, their faces grim with the knowledge of what they were about to endure. As the first volunteer was strapped to the surgical table and the apothecaries began their grim work, a shadow fell over the Raven Guard. It was the shadow of hope, but it was a dark and dangerous hope, born of grief and forged in the fires of desperation. Corax watched, his heart a cold, heavy stone in his chest. He was gambling with the future of his legion, betting everything on a chance to strike back at the traitors who had stolen so much from him. He had set a new course, one from which there could be no turning back. The chapter had been written, the directive was in motion, and the consequences, for better or for worse, would soon be unleashed upon a galaxy already drowning in war. Thanks for tuning in for this chapter of the saga. The story of the Raptors is a tragic and fascinating one, and we're just getting started. If you enjoyed this deep dive, make sure to hit that like button and subscribe so you don't miss what happens next. Drop a comment below with your thoughts on Corax's decision. Was he right? Let me know, and I'll see you in the next one, because today we're diving headfirst into Chapter 3 of our epic saga. The first recruits. You won't want to miss this. Trust me. So, last time, we set the stage for something truly monumental, something that would shape the destiny of an entire galaxy. Now, the Imperium needs heroes. Not just any heroes, but a special kind of warrior, forged in the fires of countless battles, tempered by loss, and driven by an unwavering, almost primal loyalty. Imagine this. The call goes out across the vast, sprawling territories of the Imperium. A new, unprecedented initiative is underway, and they're looking for volunteers. But these aren't fresh-faced cadets, right out of training. Oh no. These are the veterans, the ones who've seen it all, done it all, and survived. We're talking about Imperial Guardsmen, not just any guardsmen, but the elite, the grizzled, the ones with a 1,000-yard stare that tells a story no words ever could. They've faced horrors that would shatter lesser beings, stood their ground against insurmountable odds, and watched their comrades fall, one by one. Their uniforms are worn, their armor scarred, each mark a testament to a battle fought, and the life narrowly preserved. These are the broken men, as our outline puts it. And that phrase, broken men, it really hits you, doesn't it? It's not about weakness. It's about the profound impact of war. They carry the weight of countless campaigns, the echoes of plasma fire, the screams of the dying, and the silence of the fallen. Their bodies are tough, hardened by years of brutal conflict. Their reflexes honed to a razor's edge, their walking weapons, every muscle memory screaming survival and victory. But beneath that steely exterior, inside those bodies that are ready for anything the galaxy can throw at them, their minds tell a different story. They are fundamentally human, and that's where the real drama unfolds. Their minds are marked by memories, vivid, haunting, indelible. Memories of triumphs, yes, but also of terrible losses, of friends who didn't make it home, of worlds scorched to ash. They've experienced grief so profound it could swallow a lesser soul whole. And then there's love. Not just romantic love, but the deep, unbreakable bond of brotherhood forged in the crucible of war. Love for their fallen comrades. Love for the Imperium they've sworn to protect. And perhaps a lingering love for a life they once knew. A life before the endless crusade. These powerful human emotions, while making them incredibly resilient and capable of immense sacrifice, also make them incredibly complex. The Imperium needs them because their loyalty is absolute. It's not a choice, it's an intrinsic part of who they are. They are loyal to the very core of their being. To the Emperor, to humanity, to the grand, often brutal, vision of their empire. They've seen the alternative, the Xenos, the heretics, the chaos that threatens to consume everything, and they know that only the Imperium stands as a bulwark against it. Their loyalty isn't blind. It's a conviction forged in blood and fire. So, when the call comes, they step forward. Not for glory, not for riches, but out of duty, out of that ingrained loyalty, and perhaps a deep-seated need to continue fighting, to make their suffering mean something. They are the first recruits for this new, mysterious initiative. Their flesh is indeed ready. Their bodies are instruments of war, perfectly adapted to endure and inflict incredible damage. They are physically capable beyond measure. But their minds? Their minds are too human. This is the crux of their journey. How do you take these battle-hardened, loyal, yet deeply human individuals and mold them into something more? How do you reconcile the physical readiness with the psychological scars? How do you leverage their profound humanity while preparing them for trials that might demand they transcend it? This internal conflict, this delicate balance between their unwavering loyalty and their very human emotions, is what makes these first recruits so compelling. They are not mindless automatons. They are warriors with souls, with histories, with pain, and with an incredible capacity for devotion. This new chapter isn't just about what they'll become, but about the profound journey they undertake to get there. It's a story of transformation, of sacrifice, and of the enduring spirit of humanity even in the darkest of times. The stage is set. The volunteers are here, and the path ahead promises to be nothing short of revolutionary. What will become of these broken men? How will their loyalty and their humanity be tested? And what will they ultimately represent for the future of the Imperium? You're going to have to stay tuned to find out. If you're enjoying this deep dive into the lore and these incredible characters, please do me a huge favor. Smash that like button. Leave a comment with your thoughts on these veteran guardsmen, and of course make sure you're subscribed so you don't miss a single chapter of this epic journey. The data slate flickered, its light a pale ghost in the gin-forging sanctum. 3 months. Just 3 months since we sealed the aspirants in their sarcophagi. Standard Astartes indoctrination takes years, a brutal grinding down of the self until only the emperor's will remains. We had mere weeks. The High Lords demanded a miracle, a new breed of space marine, faster, stronger, and ready for the unending wars that gnaw at the Imperium's borders. We gave them one, but miracles, as I'm learning, have a price. The klaxons blared, a jarring symphony of success. Vital signs were stable, more than stable, they were off the charts. Biomass integration at 99.7%, neural pathways, alight with activity far exceeding any recorded precedent. The sarcophagi hissed open, venting clouds of alchemical steam. They emerged, not as the blank slate warriors we expected, but as something else. There was Brother Valerius, his face, once belonging to a hive ganga from the underspires of Necromunda, now bore the chiseled perfection of a transhuman demigod. Bath, Isais. They weren't the cold, calculating eyes of a killer. They held a spark of remembrance, a flicker of the man he was. He looked at his hands, clad in setamite, and flexed them. Not with the practiced ease of a weapon, but with a sense of awe and unfamiliarity. Then there was Cassian, the farmhand from an agri-world, whose world was fire and ash. He was supposed to be a vessel of righteous fury. His past he erased. Yet, as he stood, his gaze swept over us, the tech priests and apothecaries. He wasn't seeing tools of the Imperium. He saw the people who had reforged him. A ghost of a memory crossed his face, a sun-drenched field, the smell of soil after rain. It was there, a phantom limb of his soul, still attached. The experiment was a success, but not in the way the Munitorum scribes would record. They are stronger, faster, their reflexes honed to a razor's edge. But the crucial step, the psycho-conditioning that scours the soul and replaces it with dogma, it failed. Or perhaps it succeeded too well. We wanted to create the perfect soldier, and in our haste, we forgot that the most formidable weapon has always been a mind that knows what it is fighting for. They remember everything. The warmth of a mother's embrace, the sting of a first defeat, the taste of stolen fruit, the laughter of a friend, every joy, every sorrow, every scraped knee and whispered secret that defined their mortal lives remains, now housed within an 8-foot-tall body of living ceramite and plasteel. They are angels of death who recall the fragility of the lives they are sworn to protect. The Archmagos called it a catastrophic failure. He saw only deviation, a flaw in the sacred process. He saw recruits who might question, who might hesitate. He saw humanity, and he labeled it a weakness. I looked at them, standing, stoic and silent, the weight of their new existence settling upon their massive shoulders, and I saw something else entirely. I saw hope. For decades, we have taught that to become a space marine, one must cease to be a man. We believed that sentiment was a poison, that memory was a chain. But what if we were wrong? What if the truest strength isn't in forgetting who you were, but in choosing to fight for what you remember? What if the greatest protector of humanity is one who has never forgotten how to be human? They knelt, not with the blind obedience of a servitor, but with the solemn gravity of an oath sworn. Valerius, the former ganger, swore to protect the powerless he once was. Cassian the farmer swore to defend the innocent homes he'd seen burn. Their pasts were not erased. They were reforged into a shield. They were not broken and rebuilt. They were awakened. This new chapter of Astartes, born of hubris and desperation, is now a reality. They are the Emperor's finest, yet they carry a secret burden, the ghost of their own humanity. They are walking contradictions, a synthesis of man and monster, memory and duty. And as the galaxy burns, as darkness gathers on all sides, these awakened sons of the Imperium are about to be unleashed. The High Lords wanted weapons. They got something far more dangerous and far more powerful. Heroes. The question that now haunts my every waking moment is not whether they will fight, but for whom and for what. When the orders from on high conflict with the echoes in their souls. Thank you so much for joining me on this deep dive into the lore. If you enjoyed this story and want to see what happens to these awakened, be sure to hit that like button and subscribe for more tales from the grim dark future. Have you ever wondered what lies beneath the stoic, ceramite shell of a space marine? We're taught they are angels of death, post-human weapons forged for a single, brutal purpose. They are conditioned to know no fear, to feel no pain, to cast aside every shred of their former selves. Their humanity is a sacrifice laid upon the altar of the Imperium. But what if that sacrifice wasn't absolute? What if, in some forgotten corner of the galaxy, there was a chapter that remembered? Today, we delve into a tale whispered in the shadows, a story that challenges everything we know about the Adeptus Astartes. This is the story of a brotherhood, unlike any other. They don't have a glorious name etched in the annals of Imperial history. They are known simply as the Awakened. From the outside, they appear as any other chapter, clad in power armor, wielding bolters that spit death. They are a formidable sight on the battlefield. They fight with the same grim determination, the same tactical precision as their brethren across the galaxy. But when the din of battle fades and the smoke clears, the difference becomes chillingly apparent. Where other Space Marines clean their weapons in silence or engage in ritual prayer, the Awakened gather in Talk. They speak not of glorious charges or tactical doctrines, but of things long thought purged from the mind of an Astartes. They talk about their families. Imagine that, a 7-foot-old transhuman warrior, a living weapon, speaking softly of a mother-esque smile or a father-esque guiding hand from a life lived centuries ago. They recall the taste of food from their homeworlds, the scent of rain on familiar soil, the warmth of a sun that now exists only in memory. These aren't just fragmented data points. They are vivid, emotional recollections. And it doesn't stop there. The Awakened recite poetry, not hymns of battle or litanies of hate, but verses of sorrow, of love, of loss. They compose sonnets to stars that have long since died and elegies for worlds turned to dust. Art in a life supposedly dedicated solely to destruction. It's a paradox that would be deemed heresy by any inquisitor who witnessed it. Their art isn't for glory or for worship. It's a desperate anchor to a humanity they were supposed to have left behind. Perhaps the most startling deviancy is their relationship with authority. Space Marines are built on a bedrock of unflinching obedience. An order is given, and it is followed, without question, without hesitation. The Codex Astartes itself is a holy text of martial law. But the Awakens they don't refuse orders, not outright. But they will ask why. They will debate the morality of a command, the necessity of a sacrifice. They analyze their missions not just through a tactical lens, but through a philosophical one. For them, a victory that costs the soul is no victory at all. This intellectual rebellion is a profound departure from the rigid dogma of the Imperium. And while every other chapter in the vast expanse of the Imperium offers prayers to the Emperor, the Awakened do not pray. They have no chaplains chanting litanies, no icons dripping with sanctified oils. Instead, they mourn. After every battle, they gather the gene seed of their fallen brothers, not as a sacred duty, but as a funereal rite. They speak the names of the dead, not as martyrs for the Imperium, but as brothers who are lost. They grieve for the lives they took, for the worlds they couldn't save, and for the parts of themselves that die with every trigger pull. Their silence is not one of pious reflection, but of profound, collective sorrow. So, who are they? Where did they come from? The official records are sealed, or more likely, erased, but whispers persist. Some say they are a failed experiment, a flaw in the gene seed of a forgotten Primarch that allowed memory and emotion to persist. Others suggest they are the sole survivors of a catastrophe so profound it shattered their conditioning, awakening the men who slumbered within the monsters. One prevalent theory points to their creation process. It's rumored that their aspirants are not taken as children, but as young adults who have already lived, loved, and lost. Their transformation into Space Marines is thus an incomplete erasure. The memories are too strong, the emotional connections too deep to be fully scoured away. The process that is meant to create a blank slate instead creates a fractured mirror, reflecting a past that refuses to die. This unique nature makes them both incredibly effective and dangerously unreliable in the eyes of the High Lords of Terra. An awakened Marine fighting to protect the civilian population might do so with a ferocity born of genuine empathy. Seeing the faces of their own lost families in the crowds, they will hold a line not just because they were ordered to, but because they understand the true cost of failure. They are creative, adaptable, and capable of seeing solutions that rigid doctrine would dismiss. But this same humanity is their greatest weakness. An awakened Marine might hesitate to execute an exterminatus order, seeing not a statistic of heretics, but a billion individual lives. They might falter in the face of a particularly tragic loss, their grief overwhelming their combat imperative. They are a double-edged sword, a tool the Imperium doesn't know how to wield, or if it even should. Imagine being one of them, to carry the weight of a Space Marine's duty, but also the full, crushing weight of a human heart. To see the horrors of the galaxy not as an abstract threat to be purged, but as a personal tragedy that echoes your own past. Every battle is a fresh wound, every loss a new ghost to join the chorus in your mind. They are warriors who dream, not of glory or victory, but of peace, of home, of a life they can never have again. They fight in a galaxy that has no place for them, for an Imperium that would destroy them if it knew the truth. They are the brothers who dream, and their existence is perhaps the most tragic story in the 41st millennium. They are a testament to the fact that even in the heart of the most inhuman warrior, a spark of humanity can, against all odds, refuse to be extinguished. Thank you so much for joining me on this deep dive into the lore. If you enjoyed this story and want to explore more of the hidden corners of the galaxy, please consider liking this video and subscribing to the channel. It helps more than you know. Let me know in the comments what you think of The Awakened, and we'll see you in the next one. Today, we're diving deep into a single, profound question that forms the very core of Chapter 6. Now, Chapter 1 like to call Solenvar's Dilemma. So, grab your coffee, get comfortable, and let's explore this pivotal moment together. Up until now, we've seen Solenvar as the stoic monitor, the detached observer. His role is clinical, almost cold. He's the one tasked with ensuring the mental stability of his subjects, a process that involves the systematic suppression and erasure of memories. He's the guardian of a fragile peace, a peace built on a foundation of forgetting. His job is to patch the cracks in the dam, to make sure the flood of the past never breaks through. We've seen him as the instrument of a system, a cog in a machine designed to maintain order at any cost. But in Chapter 6, something shifts. The camera lens, which was once wide and objective, begins to zoom in, focusing tightly on Solenvar's own internal world. He's not just observing anymore. He's participating. He's feeling. The line between monitor and subject begins to blur. He's been listening to their fragmented stories, watching their subconscious struggles, and through this constant exposure, a seed of empathy has been planted. He sees the phantoms of joy in their eyes, the echoes of laughter that they can't quite place. He witnesses the deep, instinctual sorrow for losses they don't consciously remember. And it's in this space, surrounded by the ghosts of their erased lives, that Solenvar experiences his crisis of conscience. He's no longer just a scientist or a guardian. He's a human being witnessing the emotional toll of this forced amnesia. He starts to see the system not as a benevolent protector, but as a cruel censor, cutting out the most vibrant and vital pages of a person's life story. The goal is stability, but he begins to question the price. Is a stable, empty life truly a life worth living? This internal conflict culminates in a single, powerful line, spoken softly almost to himself. As he watches one of his subjects, he looks at their placid, untroubled face and wonders about the storms that used to rage behind those eyes. He wonders about the loves they fought for, the family they cherished, the triumphs that made them who they were. And in that moment of profound connection, he whispers the question that threatens to unravel everything. What if we were never meant to forget? This isn't just a question, it's a rebellion. It's the first crack in his own carefully constructed worldview. Think about what this implies. It suggests that our memories, even the painful ones, are not bugs in our system to be deleted. They are features. They are the building blocks of our identity. Our sorrows give depth to our joys. Our failures give meaning to our successes. Our scars tell the story of our survival. To erase them isn't to heal. It's to amputate part of our soul. Solenvar is starting to realize that the instability he has been tasked to prevent might actually be the very essence of being human. The chaos of memory, the machines of emotionless, is what it means to be alive. To love, to lose, to grieve, and to grow from it all. A life without memory is a life without context. A story without a beginning or a middle. Only a perpetually blank present. The dilemma he faces is immense. To continue his work is to perpetuate a lie, to deny others the wholeness of their own existence. But to stop, to question the system, is to risk everything. It means confronting the very foundation of his society, a foundation he has helped to build and maintain. He is the lock and the key, and for the first time, he is considering turning that key. He is realizing that perhaps the greatest danger isn't the flood of memory, but the emptiness of the desert they've created in its place. What makes Solenvar's dilemma so compelling is that it's a universal one. How often do we try to forget our own painful pasts? We tell ourselves to move on, to let it go, to not dwell on what hurts. But Solenvar's question forces us to ask ourselves, in trying to escape our pain, are we also erasing the lessons, the strength, and the person we became because of it? Are our memories, the good and the bad, the complete tapestry of our lives, something to be cherished, not censored? The chapter leaves us hanging on this precipice. Solenvar has spoken the forbidden thought aloud, and there's no taking it back. The genie is out of the bottle. He now has to choose. Will he retreat back into the comfort of his role, dismissing his empathy as a momentary weakness? Or will he embrace this newfound conviction and take a stand, knowing it could lead to his own undoing? This is the turning point, not just for Solenvar, but for the entire narrative. The Monitor is about to become the catalyst for change. This chapter is a masterclass in character development, showing how empathy can be the most powerful and disruptive force in the universe. It challenges the idea of a utopian peace built on ignorance and champions the beautiful, messy, and complicated reality of the human heart. What do you think Solenvar will do next? Let me know your theories and thoughts in the comments below. I'd love to hear what you think about this fundamental question. Thank you so much for joining me on this deep dive. If you enjoyed this analysis and want more content like this, please hit that like button. And don't forget to subscribe and ring the bell so you never miss an update. It truly helps the channel grow. Until next time, keep questioning, keep exploring, and remember the stories that make you who you are. Whispers slither through the cold stone halls of the chapter, like unseen serpents in the dark. They speak of us, the awakened. The awakened. They say we are a sickness, a weakness that festers in the heart of our brotherhood. For generations, the chapter has been a bastion of strength, a singular will forged in discipline and sacrifice. We were taught to sever the bonds of our past, to let go of the mortal coil and embrace a higher purpose. For a millennium, this has been our way. Unquestioning, unwavering. But something has changed. It started subtly, a flicker in the eyes of a battle brother remembering a childhood lullaby, a ghost of a smile for a long-lost love. We began to remember not just facts and battle doctrine, but feelings. The warmth of a sunbeam on a summer's day, the taste of a mother's cooking, the sting of tears. We started to see the faces in the crowds we were sworn to protect, not as abstract concepts, but as people, sons, daughters, mothers, fathers. We started to asterisk feel. Asterisk again. We called it the awakening. The commanders, however, they call it a heresy. They stand upon their daises of cold dogma, their faces carved from granite and mistrust. They look at us, and they do not see soldiers who have rediscovered their humanity. They see a threat, our attachments, they say, are chains that will drag the entire chapter into the abyss of sentiment. A soldier who remembers a family is a soldier who might hesitate. A warrior who feels compassion is a warrior who might question a command. And we do asterisk question, not out of defiance, but out of a newfound clarity. We ask why. Why must this village be purged? Are there no other options? We ask for what purpose? For what grand design must we sacrifice not only our lives, but the very essence of what we are fighting to protect? These questions, once unthinkable, now echo in the mess halls and the armories. To the commanders, each question is not a search for understanding, but a seed of rebellion, a crack in the foundation of their absolute authority. The rumors they spread are poison, dripping into the ears of our brethren who have not yet awakened. They say, we consort with forbidden powers, that our memories are lies, whispered by the enemy. They twist our compassion into cowardice, our empathy into a crippling disease. Tewatsu us. Every conversation is monitored. Every moment of quiet reflection is scrutinized for signs of dissent. Brother is being turned against brother, the old camaraderie replaced by a chilling suspicion. I remember my own awakening. It wasn't a sudden cataclysm, but a slow dawn. We were deployed on Cygnus X1, a world choked by ash and industrial grime. Our orders were simple. Pacify the striking miners. To the chapter, they were just obstacles. Numbers on a data sheet. But as we advanced, I saw a child, no older than my own sister had been, clutching a crudely carved wooden bird. Her face was smudged with soot, her eyes wide with a terror that cut through 1,000 years of indoctrination. In that moment, the wall I had built around my heart crumbled. These waste, an objective. This was a little girl, and we were the monsters in her nightmares. That night, the memories came flooding back, not just of my sister, but of everything. The smell of rain on dry earth, the feeling of pride in my father's eyes, the crushing grief of his loss. These weren't weaknesses. They were anchors. They were the very things that made life worth fighting for. When I shared this with my squad, I saw recognition in their eyes. They too had felt it, this stirring of a soul long thought dead. We were not alone. The commanders fear what they cannot control. They are masters of a brutal, simple calculus of war, where humanity is a variable to be eliminated. We, the awakened, disrupt their equation. We propose a different path, one where strength is tempered with wisdom, and duty is guided by conscience. We are not heretics. We are the true guardians of the chapter's purpose. For what is the point of protecting humanity if we must first abandon our own? They gather their loyalists, their purifiers, who see our awakening as a stain to be cleansed. The tension in the fortress is thick enough to choke on. Every shadow seems to hold a threat. Every friendly face could be a mask for an informant. They want to force us to forget, to surgically remove our rediscovered souls and turn us back into unthinking weapons. They believe this will make the chapter strong again. They are wrong. It will only hollow it out, leaving behind an empty suit of armor, powerful but soulless. But they have underestimated us. Our memories are not our weakness. They are our strength. Our attachments are not chains. They are our reason to fight. The bonds we forge with each other, the awakened, are stronger than any edict handed down from on high. We will not be silenced. We will not allow them to extinguish this new dawn. The rumors they spread may cloud the air for a time, but the truth, like the morning sun, will eventually burn through. The chapter stands at a crossroads, and it must choose between a future of blind obedience and one of enlightened humanity. And we, the awakened, will be the ones to guide it. The whispers of heresy will become the clarion call of a new age. Thank you so much for joining me on this journey into the heart of the chapter. If this story resonates with you, and you want to see what happens next, please hit that like button and subscribe for more. Let me know in the comments what you think the commanders will do next. Until next time, stay vigilant and never be afraid to ask why. What becomes of the memories, the attachments, the very humanity they fought to protect? In the grim darkness of the far future, this question takes on a profound, almost heretical, meaning for the Emperor's finest warriors. This is the story of the awakened and the heresy of memory. After millennia of thankless, brutal service, some of the Adeptus Custodes find themselves changed. They have seen empires rise and fall, witnessed horrors that would shatter mortal minds, and stood guard over the silent golden throne. But even for these golden demigods, the weight of eternity is a heavy one. A weariness settles in, not of the body, which is nigh indestructible, but of the soul. They begin to remember. Not just the battles, not just the doctrines, but the faces, the names, the lives they once lived before the long vigil began. They start to withdraw from their active duties, seeking solace not in solitude, but in the company of others who share their burden. These are the awakened. They form quiet, unofficial brotherhoods, gathering in the forgotten corners and shadowed halls of the imperial palace. Here, there are no ranks, no titles, no gilded armor, only equals bound by a shared, forbidden remembering. They speak in hushed tones, not of grand strategies or Xenos threats, but of simpler things. A memory of a childhood home on a world long since turned to dust, the taste of a specific meal, the sound of a sibling's laughter, the face of a parent. These are fragments, whispers from lives they were meant to forget, lives sacrificed on the altar of duty. Each memory shared is an act of defiance, a reclamation of the self that was stripped away to forge the perfect guardian. The celebrated historian Solenvar, in his clandestine studies of the 10,000, managed to record the words of one such awakened. This quote, found in his forbidden texts, cuts to the very heart of their philosophy. It says, "The Emperor made us to protect humanity. He did not say we must stop being human to do so." Think about the sheer gravity of that statement. For centuries, the Custodes have been seen as living weapons, extensions of the Emperor's will, their individuality subsumed by their sacred purpose. They are supposed to be above human sentiment, above attachment, above loss. To them, memory is a distraction, a weakness, an imperfection that could compromise their vigil. To indulge in it, to astorisk, cheris astorisk. It is therefore a form of heresy. Not a heresy against the imperial creed, perhaps, but a heresy against their own design, their own purpose. These brotherhoods are not plotting rebellion. They are not seeking power. Their heresy is a quiet one, a personal one. It is the simple, radical act of remembering that they were once men. They gather to mourn the lives they lost, not on the battlefield, but to the process that made them custodians. In these secret meetings, they find a kind of peace, a validation that their pasts mattered, that the people they were are not entirely gone. This act of remembrance serves a vital purpose. It keeps them grounded, while their comrades focus solely on the macroscale, the protection of the Imperium, the sanctity of the throne. The awakened remember the microscale. They remember the individual lives they are sworn to protect. It's a profound paradox. By embracing what is considered a weakness, they might be fulfilling their duty in a more complete, more meaningful way than their brethren. The quote from Solenvar's records is a powerful thesis. It suggests that true protection doesn't come from being an unthinking automaton, no matter how perfect. It comes from understanding and valuing what you are protecting. How can you truly defend humanity if you've forgotten what it means to be human? The awakened are walking that dangerous razor's edge. They are guardians who remember the warmth of the sun, the feeling of love, the sting of loss. Their existence poses a difficult question for the Imperium and for the Custodes themselves. Is this a sign of corruption, a flaw in their creation, or is it a necessary adaptation for beings who must endure an eternity of war and watchfulness? The Captain General is aware of these brotherhoods. Of course, nothing happens within the palace without his knowledge, but he allows them to exist. Perhaps seeing the wisdom in their quiet rebellion, or perhaps seeing it as a harmless outlet for an inevitable psychological strain. The story of the awakened is a tragic but beautiful one. It's a testament to the resilience of the human spirit, even when that spirit is encased in oromite and conditioned for eternal war. They are a poignant reminder that even in the most oppressive, duty-bound existence, the need to connect, to remember, and to feel can never be truly extinguished. They are the living memory of a humanity that the Imperium often forgets in its own relentless crusade. And so, in the shadows of the greatest fortress in the galaxy, the heresy of memory continues. The quiet guardians gather, share their ghosts, and in doing so, they keep a different kind of flame alive, not just the flame of the Imperium, but the flickering, precious flame of their own lost humanity. Thank you so much for joining me on this deep dive into the lore. If you enjoyed this exploration of the Awakened and their unique philosophy, please hit that like button and subscribe for more stories from the hidden corners of the universe. Let me know in the comments what you think about this heresy. Is it a strength or a weakness? I'd love to hear your thoughts. Until next time, stay curious. The city slept under a blanket of artificial twilight, unaware of the storm that was about to break. It came not with thunder or lightning, but with a coded whisper. Purge Order 7-3B. A simple command, but for the apothecaries, it was a declaration of war against their own creations. For the Awakened, it was a death sentence. In the sterile silence of 1,000 hidden laboratories, the purge began. Years of research, priceless data on the awakening process, were wiped clean from servers. Genetic samples, the very essence of this new evolution of humanity, were incinerated, their potential reduced to ash. The apothecaries, once pioneers and guardians, now became executioners, their white coats stained with the invisible blood of progress. They moved with chilling efficiency, silencing not just their subjects, but any who knew of their existence. Witnesses, collaborators, even low-level assistants, who'd glimpsed the truth all, were erased. The organization was cutting out its own heart to save its skin, a brutal act of self. But in a high-rise lab overlooking the sprawling metropolis, one man hesitated. Apothecary Solenvar stood before a cryogenic stasis pod, the soft blue light illuminating the face of his most promising subject, Ilara. His terminal blinked with a confirmation request for her termination. His finger hovered over the delete key, a single press away from consigning a decade of his life's work, a living, breathing person, to oblivion. He had followed every order, adhered to every protocol his entire career. He believed in the Apothecarium's mission, or at least, he used to. But this wasn't science, it was slaughter. He thought of the long nights spent mapping Ilara's unique genetic code, the wonder in her eyes when she first controlled her nascent abilities, the debates they'd had about philosophy and the future of mankind. She wasn't just data, she wasn't just a sample. She was the future. Destroying her, destroying all of them, was an act of profound cowardice, a surrender to fear. The Council feared what they had created, feared the change the Awakened represented. They would rather burn the world than risk losing control of it. Solenvar looked from the blinking cursor to the peaceful face in the pod. He saw the flicker of a dream, a possibility of a better world, one where humanity didn't fear its own evil. He had taken an oath to the Apothecarium, an oath of obedience, but he had also taken an unspoken oath to the pursuit of knowledge, to the sanctity of life he had helped bring into being. In that moment, the two oaths clashed, and only one could survive the night. His hand moved, not to the delete key, but to the emergency release protocol. The system chimed, a soft, almost hesitant tone. Manual override initiated. Cryostasis. Disengagement sequence started. The hiss of depressurizing gas filled the lab. He didn't know what would happen next, where they would go, or how they would survive. He was betraying his order, his career, his entire life. But as he watched Ilara's eyes begin to flutter open, he knew he had made the only choice that mattered. He chose preservation over obedience. He chose hope over fear. The purge was meant to be an ending, a final, brutal chapter. For Solenvar and Ilara, it was about to become a beginning. He grabbed the datapad, frantically downloading every file he could, encrypting it against the Apothecarium's prying eyes.
Ilara?
He whispered as her consciousness returned, her gaze hazy but focusing on him. We have to go. Now. There was no time for explanations. The sound of heavy boots echoed from the end of the corridor. The local enforcers were here to ensure the order was carried out. Solenvar pulled Ilara from the pod, her legs unsteady. He handed her a simple gray cloak.
Put this on.
Don't speak. Don't look at anyone. Just follow me. He led her through a labyrinth of service corridors and forgotten stairwells, his heart pounding with a rhythm of terror and adrenaline. Every shadow seemed to hold a threat. Every distant shout felt like it was for them. He was an academic, a scientist, not a fugitive. But tonight, he had to be, for both their sakes. They emerged into a grimy alleyway, the city's underbelly a stark contrast to the clean, sterile world he had always known. The air was thick with the smell of rain and refuse. Above them, the gleaming towers of the Apothecarium seemed to watch them like silent, judging gods. Solenvar knew he had saved more than just one life. On the datapad he clutched was the key to the awakening, the complete genetic sequence, the research, everything. It was a beacon of hope for any other awakened who might have survived the night's massacre. It was a weapon against the order that had betrayed its own purpose. He had no plan, no allies, and an all-powerful organization hunting him. All he had was a desperate conviction and the sleepy, confused, and powerful young woman by his side. They melted into the crowds of the nocturnal city. Two ghosts running from a past that was trying to erase them, running towards a future they would have to build from the ashes. The purge had failed to be absolute. A single spark had escaped the fire, and Solenvar would protect it with his life, fanning it until it was ready to burn down the old world and illuminate a new one. Thank you so much for joining me on this journey. If you enjoyed this chapter of the story, please hit that like button and consider subscribing to the channel so you and miss what happens next. Ring that notification bell, and I'll see you in the next video. The war was over. We thought, the last of the awakened. Those of us who had broken free from the collective's grip were cornered in the ruins of what was once a city. We'd fought for freedom, for the right to remember who we were, to feel, to love, to be human. Now, huddled together in the dust and shadows, we were just survivors, and our survival was about to be put to the ultimate test. They came at dawn. Not with weapons blazing, but with a silence that was far more terrifying. The enforcers, their blank visors reflecting the gray morning light, moved with an unnerving, synchronized grace. There was no resistance. We were too few. Too exhausted. The fight had been bled out of us weeks ago. They rounded us up, their movements efficient and devoid of any emotion. We were no longer rebels or traitors. We were merely a problem to be solved, a loose end to be tied. We were marched through the skeletal remains of the city, our footsteps echoing in the silence. The air was thick with the smell of damp concrete and something metallic, something final. We were led to the old Plaza of Unity, a place that now seemed like a monument to a cruel joke. In the center stood the monolith, the obsidian heart of the collective's power. It hummed with a low, oppressive energy that vibrated in our bones. This is where the sorting began. The enforcers moved among us, their scanners glowing green as they passed over our faces. One by one, individuals were pulled from the crowd. No words were spoken. A subtle gesture, a firm grip on an arm, and they were led away towards the shadowed archways at the plaza's edge. We all knew what it meant. Execution. They were deemed unrecoverable, their spirits too strong, their memories too deeply ingrained. We didn't hear any sounds, but we knew the collective was efficient. It was clean. It was absolute. I watched as Marcus was taken. He, who had taught us the old songs, whose laughter had been a beacon in our darkest days. He didn't struggle, ejus turned, and for a fleeting moment, his eyes met mine. There was no fear in them, only a profound sadness and a silent farewell. Then he was gone. Elara was next, the young artist who painted memories of a son she'd never truly seen. Her defiance was quiet but unyielding. They pulled her away, and a part of our shared hope went with her. Those of us who remained were the salvageable. That's what they called us. We were led towards the monolith, its hum growing louder, becoming a physical presence that pushed against our chests. This wasn't an execution of the body, but of the soul. This was the final mercy, decayet italiano, the mind scrub. We were forced to kneel, our heads bowed before the humming stone. The psychic reconditioning began. It wasn't a sharp pain, but a slow, creeping cold that started at the base of my skull and seeped into every corner of my mind. It felt like my thoughts were being submerged in thick, icy water. I fought it. I desperately clung to memories. 2 flashes of a life I had reclaimed. My mother's face, smiling as she taught me my name. The feeling of rain on my skin for the first time after I awakened. The taste of a wild apple, crisp and sweet. The warmth of a shared fire with my fellow rebels. Each memory was a precious gem, a testament to my existence. I clutched them. Sildad Tem tried to build a fortress in my mind to protect them from the encroaching void. But the pressure was immense, relentless. The cold seeped deeper. The images began to fracture, to blur at the edges. My mother's smile wavered, then dissolved into static. The taste of the apple became ash in my mouth. The names and faces of my friends, the very people I had just seen marched away, began to fade like old photographs left in the sun. It was an agony beyond physical pain, the feeling of being unwritten, of my entire being dissolving into nothingness. I could feel the others around me succumbing, the silent, internal screams of their consciousness being wiped clean, a collective gasp of souls being extinguished. The reconditioning was designed to erase everything: our humanity, our rebellion, our love, our loss. It would leave behind a blank slate, a compliant drone ready to be reintegrated into the collective. No more messy emotions, no more dangerous memories, just obedience. The process was almost complete. The fortress in my mind was crumbling. The cold was overwhelming, and a strange, hollow peace began to settle in. It promised an end to the pain, an end to the grief. It was seductive. Letting go seemed so much easier than holding on. My name. What was my name? It was on the tip of my tongue, a ghost of a sound. The image of Marcus's sad eyes was the last thing to flicker before the darkness threatened to swallow it whole. But in that final moment, something sparked. A tiny, defiant ember I thought had long been extinguished. It was the memory of a promise I made to a little girl I'd rescued. A promise to remember for her. That single, selfless thought, that connection to another, became an anchor. The cold receded, just a fraction. It was still there, a crushing weight, but it no longer had me completely. I was being erased, but a fragment, a tiny, hidden piece of who I was, held on. The humming stopped. I lifted my head. The world was muted. The colors washed out. I looked at the others, kneeling beside me. Their eyes were vacant, empty. The spark was gone. They were gone. They were shells, their minds scrubbed clean, ready to serve. I looked at my own hands, not recognizing them. A wave of confusion washed over me. Where was I? Who were these people? A program directive surfaced in my new, emptier mind. Return to designated unit. Await instruction. I stood, my movements stiff, robotic. I fell in line with the others, turning away from the monolith, away from the plaza of our final defeat. We marched in perfect synchrony, our faces blank, our pasts erased. We were the collectives, mercifully saved. But deep within the recesses of my scrubbed mind, a ghost remained. A whispered, a single, indelible image of a man's sad eyes, and a promise made to a little girl. It was buried hidden and silent. For now, the mind scrub was their final mercy, but they made one mistake. They didn't realize that even from the smallest ember, a fire can one day be My body was theirs, but a fragment of my soul was still my own, waiting. Thank you so much for joining me on this journey. If this story resonated with you, please hit that like button, and consider subscribing for more tales from the worlds we create. Your support means everything. See you in the next one, in the echoing silence of the Kronos lab, where the hum of forgotten machinery was the only testament to ambition. Solenvar made his final, desperate move. His hands, usually so steady, trembled as he held the data casket. It wasn't just a storage device. It was a sarcophagus for a truth too dangerous to live, yet too vital to be destroyed. Polished obsidian gleamed under the emergency lights, its surface cool and unforgiving, a perfect mirror for the chaos he had unleashed. He had once dreamed of perfecting life, of editing the very source code of existence to erase disease and suffering. But the line between godhood and monstrosity is a thin one, and he had stumbled across it blindly. The experiment project Chimera, they had called it, had become a nightmare. Not a failure in the scientific sense, but a horrifying success. The results were unnatural. Beings of elegant terror, born from a code he had written but could no longer control. The lab reports, the video logs, the sequence at every byte was a whisper of his hubris. Now, he had to bury it. He initiated the final encryption sequence. The casket words softly, a low thrum that seemed to vibrate in his very bones. This was no ordinary password protection. It was a gene lock, a cryptographic key woven from the double helix of his own DNA. The lock required a living sample a touch, a breath, a drop of blood. It was the ultimate security measure, a lock that made the key a part of the locksmith. Only he, Solenvar, could ever open it. Or, perhaps, someone who shared his bloodline. A chilling thought for a man with no family to speak of. He pressed his thumb against the sensor plate. A needle, finer than a hair, pricked his skin, drawing a minuscule bead of blood. The light on the casket shifted from red to a soft, pulsing blue. Sealed. A digital ghost, now trapped in a physical shell. The truth of Project Chimera was now a codex, lost to the world, its secrets bound to his own life force. He felt a strange sense of relief, a heavy, sinking calm. He had locked the monster in the basement, but he knew, deep down, he was still in the house. His gaze drifted to the star charts flickering on the main view screen. He needed to disappear, to become a ghost himself. He chose a destination at random, a forgotten trade route in the Outer Rim, a place where names and histories could be shed like old skin. He picked up the data casket. It felt impossibly heavy, weighted not by its physical mass, but by the gravity of the knowledge it contained. It was his sin, his burden, and his only hope for redemption. He placed the casket inside a specially shielded compartment of his personal courier ship, the Wanderer. As the ship's engines began to hum, their power in stark contrast to the silence of the abandoned lab, Solenvar didn't look back. There was nothing left for him here but ghosts. As the station dwindled to a bright spark in the void, he whispered to the empty cockpit, "Let it be lost. Let it all be forgotten." But some secrets have a way of finding their way back into the light. The lost codex was now adrift, a time bomb waiting for a key that walked on two legs. He charted a course through nebulas and asteroid fields, taking the long way around everything. He traded his identity for a new one at a grimy port on a moon that had no name. He became a freighter pilot, a smuggler, a nobody. For years, the casket remained hidden, a dark secret in the belly of his ship. A grew holder, the lines on his face mapping the star systems he'd traversed. He almost managed to forget. Almost. But the universe has a long memory, a stray transmission, a chance encounter, a whisper of a legendary scientist who vanished with a revolutionary discovery. The whispers grew into rumors, and rumors into hunts. Factions he had never heard, EV power-hungry corporations, zealous technocults, remnant government agencies all started searching for the ghost of Chrono's lab. They were looking for a myth, a key to unlock ultimate power. They were looking for the lost codex. They didn't know what they were truly hunting. They didn't know that opening the casket wouldn't grant them power, but unleash a plague of perfected horrors. They were hunting for a treasure chest, oblivious to the fact that it was a Pandora's box. Solenvar knew he couldn't run forever. The lock was his DNA, and in an age of galactic surveillance, that made him a beacon. One day, on a dusty outpost world, a scanner pinged. It was a partial genetic match, a signature too close to his own to be a coincidence. The hunt was no longer for a ghost. It was for him. He grabbed the casket, its cold surface a familiar weight in his old hands. The time for running was over. The time for hiding the truth was past. Now, he had to find someone, anyone, who could be trusted not to open the box, but to help him destroy it, and the key, forever. His final journey had begun, not to hide the codex, but to ensure its secrets died with him. The lost was about to be found, and the consequences would reshape the galaxy. Thank you so much for joining me on this chapter of our story. If you're captivated by the fate of the lost codex and Solenvar's desperate quest, make sure to hit that subscribe button and turn on notifications. You won't want to miss what happens next. Drop a comment below with your theories, and we'll see you in the next video. Have you ever heard of the saying, The road to hell is paved with good intentions. There is no story in the vast lore of Warhammer 40,000 that embodies this tragic truth more perfectly than that of Corvus Corax and his desperate, disastrous attempt to rebuild his shattered Raven Guard Legion. This is the tale of the Raptors, the cursed sons of Corax, and the regret that would haunt a Primarch for eternity. To understand this tragedy, we must first go back to the darkest days of the Horus heresy. The Raven Guard, masters of shadow and swift assault, arrived at the Istvan V system ready to bring the Emperor's justice to the traitors. But they were betrayed, ambushed, outgunned, and facing overwhelming odds. The Legion was decimated in what would become known as the Drop Site Massacre. Corax and a handful of survivors barely escaped with their lives, but the vast majority of his sons were lost. The Raven Guard was broken. The Legion that once numbered in the tens of thousands was reduced to a mere few thousand. How could they possibly continue to fight in the galactic civil war? How could they enact their vengeance upon Horus and his traitors? This question weighed heavily on Corax's soul. He felt the loss of every single Marine as a personal failure, a wound that would never truly heal. But Corax was a Primarch, a being of immense intellect and resourcefulness. He remembered a secret, a gift from the Emperor himself. Before the Great Crusade even began, the Emperor had shared with him the foundational science of creating space marines, the secrets of the Primarch project itself. This knowledge was a key, a forbidden key, to rapidly accelerating the gene seed implantation and maturation process. With it, Corax believed he could create new legions of Astartes in a fraction of the normal time. He could rebuild his Raven Guard, not in centuries, but in mere months. It was a desperate gamble, a pact with forbidden science. Deep within the Raven Spire on their homeworld of deliverance, Corax and his chief apothecaries began their work. They used the pure genetic material of the Primarch himself as a template, hoping to create a new generation of Raven Guard that were faster, stronger, and more stable than any before. The initial results were miraculous. The new aspirants, who would become known as the Raptors, matured at an impossible rate. Their bodies accepted the G-Seed flawlessly. They were the perfect warriors, a new hope for a legion on the brink of extinction. For a moment, it seemed Corax had achieved the impossible. The first company of these new Marines was a resounding success. They were everything he had hoped for and more. But this success was a cruel dawn before a terrible night. As the project scaled up, as more and more aspirants were subjected to the accelerated process, a darkness began to creep in. The whispers started subtly. Some of the new Marines began to exhibit strange mutations. A flicker of scales on the skin, an elongation of the limbs, eyes that became just a little too predatory. At first, these were dismissed as minor aberrations, acceptable losses in a desperate war. But the mutations grew worse, more pronounced, more monstrous. The perfection of their initial physical forms began to warp and decay. Their bodies twisted into horrifying parodies of the Astartes form, their minds fracturing under the strain. What was happening? The answer lay with the Alpha Legion. The so-called Hidden Legion, masters of deceit and sabotage, had learned of Corax's project. They saw an opportunity not just to destroy the Raven Guard's hope, but to twist it into a weapon against them. Agents of the Alpha Legion, likely with the aid of demonic powers from the warp, had secretly tainted the original Primarch genetic material that the Emperor had gifted to Corax. They had poisoned the wellspring of the Raven Guard's future. Their pure gene stock was corrupted with chaotic energy, a demonic, mutative code that turned Corax's desperate hope into a factory for monsters. The new Marines being produced were no longer the saviors of the Legion. They were twisted, devolved creatures, more beast than man. They possessed the strength of a space marine but were driven by raw, animalistic rage and agony. They were in constant pain, their bodies and minds a prison of corrupted flesh. When Corax discovered the truth, his heart shattered. He saw what his ambition, his desperation, had wrought. He had wanted to create saviors, but instead he had birthed monsters. He had sought to give his fallen legion new life, but he had only created beings defined by suffering. The horror of his creation was too much to bear. He personally led the charge to put down these twisted abominations, his own children. Each one he struck down felt like another piece of his soul being torn away. The labs were purged with flame. Every record, Every piece of data related to the project was ordered destroyed by Corax himself. He wanted no trace of his greatest failure to remain. He could not allow anyone else to repeat his terrible mistake. The Raptors project was buried, erased from Imperial history as best as a Primarch could manage. But the memory, the guilt, could not be erased from his mind. This failure broke something inside Corvus Corax. The pragmatic, shadowy Primarch was consumed by a grief and self-loathing that would follow him for the rest of his days. Even after the heresy ended and the traitors were defeated, he could not find peace. He had saved the Imperium, but he had damned his own sons in the process. After a year of self-imposed solitude, locking himself away in the highest towers of the Ravenspire, Corax emerged a changed man. His final act was to stand before the remaining Raven Guard, a legion he had failed to rebuild. He looked upon his true sons, the survivors of Istvan and the Long War, and then he left. His destination was the Eye of Terror, the heart of chaos itself. His last recorded words, whispered to his commanders before he vanished into the warp, were a chilling testament to his eternal torment. Nevermore. These 2 words became a legend, a curse, a promise of vengeance. But what of the Raptors? What of his original regret? Before he left, another whisper was heard, a confession that revealed the true depth of his pain. Looking upon the wreckage of his grand experiment, the Primarch of the Raven Guard was heard to say, "I sought to give them back their souls. I gave them pain instead, and we'd that the Lord of the Ravens disappeared, hunting the traitors in the dark places of the galaxy, forever haunted by the memory of his monstrous children and the good intentions that led him and them straight to hell." This tale serves as a grim reminder that even for a Primarch, some shortcuts are not worth taking, and some secrets are best left buried. Thank you so much for joining me on this journey into one of the 40K universe's most poignant tragedies. If you enjoyed the story and want to explore more of the hidden lore of Warhammer, please hit that like button, subscribe to the channel, and ring the bell so you don't miss our next deep dive. Let me know in the comments which tragic figure you'd like to see us cover next. Until then, stay safe, and may the Emperor protect. Eerie, atmospheric music begins, subtly pulsing hello, story lovers, and welcome back to our journey. Today, we delve into the chilling aftermath of Solenvar's ordeal in Chapter 14, The Price of Remembrance. Prepare yourselves, for this chapter explores the very essence of what makes us who we are. The air in the inquisitorial chamber was sterile, cold, a stark contrast to the searing heat that had just scoured Solenvar's mind. He lay on a metal slab, a thin sheet draped over him, his body trembling with a cold that had nothing to do with the room's temperature. It was a coldness that seeped from the inside out, a void where vibrant memories once lived. The Inquisitor, a figure of shadow and authority, observed him with an impassive gaze, his face a mask of clinical detachment. The procedure was, by their standards, a success. The targeted memories, the connections to the rebellion, the faces of his comrades, they were gone, excised. A clean slate. Solenvar's first conscious thought was a gasp for air, as if he'd been held underwater for an eternity. He sat up, his head pounding with a dull, rhythmic ache. He looked around the room, his eyes struggling to focus on the gleaming instruments, the stark white walls. Nothing felt familiar. A woman in a healer's tunic approached him, her smile gentle but practiced. "How are you feeling, Subject 734?" she asked, her voice a soft hum. Subject 734. The designation meant nothing to him. "My name," he began, but the word caught in his throat. What was his name? He knew he had won, a real one, but it was like trying to grasp smoke. He could feel its shape, its weight, but it slipped through his mental fingers. The name they gave him, Solenvar felt alien on his tongue, a borrowed cloak that didn't fit. They told him he had suffered a severe head trauma during a manufacturing accident. A convenient lie. They said the Inquisition, in their benevolence, had saved him, healed him. They gave him new clothes, a new identification slate, a new purpose. He was assigned to a low-level data and entry position within the very bureaucracy that had broken him. Day after day, he would sit in a small, windowless cubicle, inputting meaningless strings of code into a terminal. It was mind-numbing work, designed to keep him docile, to prevent any independent thought from taking root. His world shrank to the 4 gray walls of his workspace and the small, sterile habunet. He was a ghost, haunting the periphery of a life he couldn't remember. He felt a constant, gnawing emptiness, a sorrow for a loss he couldn't name. His colleagues, other rehabilitated individuals, moved with the same listless gait. Their eyes were vacant, their conversations limited to polite, pre-approved pleasantries about the weather or production quotas. There was no laughter, no passion, no spark. They were all hollowed-out shells, their pasts erased, their futures dictated. Solenvar tried to connect, to find a flicker of recognition in their eyes, but there was nothing. They were strangers to him, and more terrifyingly, he was a stranger to himself. He would catch his reflection in the polished chrome of a doorway and see a man he didn't know. The face was his, with its tired eyes and a new, faint scar above his brow from the procedure. But the person looking back was a void. Who was this man? Did he have a family? Did he love someone? Did anyone love him? The questions were a constant, silent scream in the back of his mind. But the mind is a resilient thing, it fights back. The scrubbing, dog brutal, had not been perfect. The Inquisition had underestimated the power of the human heart, the tenacity of connection. It started with the dreams. At first, they were just fleeting sensations, the warmth of a hand in his, the scent of wildflowers on a summer breeze, the echo of shared laughter. These feelings would leave him waking with a profound sense of longing, tears sometimes staining his cheeks for reasons he couldn't comprehend. He would lie in the darkness of his habuna, his heart aching for something, for someone, that his conscious mind insisted never existed. He tried to dismiss them as tricks of a traumatized brain, but they felt too real, too vital. They were whispers from a buried life. Then, the fragments became clearer. Faces began to appear in the swirling mists of his sleep. A woman with eyes the color of the evening sky, her smile both fierce and gentle. An old man with a face like a road map of 1,000 battles, his hand resting reassuringly on Solenvar's shoulder. A young boy with a mischievous grin, clutching a wooden toy soldier. He couldn't hear their voices, couldn't remember their names, but the emotion they evoked was overwhelming. Love, loyalty, comradeship. Each night, he would see them, these nameless ghosts of his past. He started keeping a secret data slate, sketching their faces from memory the moment he woke up, desperate to hold on to these precious, painful remnants. The lines were clumsy, his hand shaking, but the likenesses were undeniable. He knew them. He knew them. One night, the dream was different. It was sharper, more vivid. He was standing in a forest, the moonlight filtering through the canopy. The woman with the sky-blue eyes was there. She wasn't smiling. She was speaking, her mouth forming a single word. He couldn't hear it, but he could read her lips. A name. Asterisk. Elara, asterisk. The name hit him like a physical blow. Elara, he woke with a jolt, the name a burning ember in his mind. Elara. He whispered it into the silence of his room. The name tasted of hope and of heartbreak. It was a key, a single, precious key to a door he didn't even know existed. For the first time since the scrubbing, Solenvar felt something other than emptiness. It was a dangerous, terrifying, and exhilarating flicker of his former self. He knew what this meant. To remember was to defy. To seek out the truth was to invite the wrath of the Inquisition all over again. The price of remembrance had already been immense, but the price of forgetting was his very soul. Looking at the sketched faces on his data, at the name asterisk, Elara asterisk, he had just typed beneath the woman with the fierce, gentle smile. Solenvar made a choice. He was no longer Subject 734. He was Solenvar, and he would find the people in his dreams. He would reclaim his past, no matter the cost. The ghost in the machine was starting to remember, and the game was about to change. The Inquisition had tried to erase a man, but in doing so, they may have just created their most determined enemy. And that is where we leave chapter 14. What an intense and emotional ride. The struggle for identity, the resilience of memory, it's just so powerfully written. What do you think Solenvar will do next? How will he even begin to find these people from his dreams? Let me know all your theories and thoughts down in the comments. I read every single one, and I love discussing these twists and turns with you all. Thank you so much for joining me today for this chapter breakdown. If you enjoyed it and want to continue this journey with us, please make sure to hit that like button. And if you haven't already, subscribe to the channel and ring that notification bell so you don't miss a single update. Your support means the world and allows me to keep creating this content for you. Until next time, stay curious and keep reading. Sound of static, slowly fading into a faint, distant hum log entry. Final. The date. It no longer matters. The war is over. They say we won. They say the great silence has fallen, that the galaxy is finally at peace. But what is peace without memory? We paid a heavy price. We surrendered our names, our pasts, our very selves to become perfect soldiers. We were taught that memory was a weakness, a ghost that would haunt the battlefield. So we severed the ties, locked the doors, and threw away the keys. They called it the Awakening Protocol, a failsafe. A promise that when the fighting was done, our minds would be returned to us, piece by piece. But the archives are corrupted. The data streams are broken. The voices that were supposed to guide us back are silent. We are a generation of echoes, living in bodies that don't feel like our own, walking worlds we don't remember. Every face is a stranger's, every sunrise a first. I've spent cycles sifting through these fragmented recordings, searching for a ghost in the machine, a whisper of who I was, who we were. Was I a farmer? A poet? Did I have a family? A home? The questions are a constant hum beneath the silence. Sometimes, in the quietest moments, I think I can almost hear a name on the edge of my consciousness, a phantom word that vanishes when I try to grasp it. It's a cruel kind of hope. But even in this vast emptiness, a spark can ignite. A single, surviving memory can rewrite an entire existence. It's the one thing they couldn't erase completely, the core of who we are. They believed memory was a flaw, but it's our salvation. It's the path back. Because even in the deepest silence, memory survives. The recording clicks off, a long silence, followed by the hiss of a cryogenic stasis pod, a sharp, mechanical inhale. Across the galaxy, on a forgotten moon littered with the debris of the final battle, a figure in obsidian armor stirs. Frost cracks and falls from his helmet as his head slowly lifts. His visor glows with a flicker of renewed life. A low, raspy voice, unused for an age, breaks the sterile silence of the chamber. It's a whisper, a revelation, a reclamation. Helin,